Sago. And I say Sago in Mohawk because my home community of Cornwall is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. But I'm sitting in my office on Parliament Hill in East Block. And so I also recognize Anishinaabe, Algonquin people and sit here in gratitude. I'm also in gratitude to OBIN for this invitation and thankful for the work that you all are doing on this very important issue. I've been a legal clinic lawyer, actually, for 32 years now, and I still practice part-time. And so poverty law has been at the center of my career. And one of the reasons I went into municipal politics is because midway through my career, I was representing the children of the clients that I had when I first started as a legal aid lawyer. And it felt important for me to sit around a municipal table to have conversations from a more systemic point of view. So the casework is important still to me. Representing people needing social assistance and disability benefits, but recognizing that those rates never keep up with what is going on in our communities. Recognizing that even winning those cases wasn't necessarily going to lift my clients out of poverty. And so sitting around a municipal table felt like a way to have a bigger conversation, have bigger impact, and talk about budgets in a way that would recognize poverty more effectively. I don't know if I always feel successful in this battle, but coming here and seeing OBIN is helpful. I also now sit as a senator alongside Senator Senator Kim Pate, whose Bill S-233 is currently being discussed at the Senate Committee of National Finance. So we are looking at this framework bill, because it's a private senator's bill, to put this in a national place, in the federal government's hands, to take a look at this issue. But the most important order of government is municipal. So that's why we're here today, to hear from councillors and to speak to the people that are closest to the people. And I want to ask them all this kind of big question about how poverty is impacting their respective communities, how poverty feels in their respective communities. And I will just arbitrarily start with Councillor Lori from Niagara Falls.
Hi, Senator. Thank you. Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for the question. I wanted to bring some attention to the Niagara Falls motion because technically our city council did not approve the implementation. We were going through massive discussions and we were going in all different directions, and I could sort of see where it was going and it was not going to get approved. But some of the words that our councillors used were that they were in support of the concept, but they weren't necessarily in support of implementing it right now. So what our council did approve was the concept of basic income. So I just want to put that out there. And you asked about the poverty in our community. So in Niagara Falls, we all like to think we're special. We have different things within our community. Niagara Falls does have a lot of different things. We are a tourist community. A lot of times we have low-paying tourism jobs. Not that they're all low-paying, but there are some good-paying jobs as well. It is very seasonal. Niagara Falls also has a very high percentage of Ontario Works and ODSP recipients, and we have a very large percentage of seniors as well. So in our community, it was definitely something that we could see. Homeless is a challenge all across the country, and it was something that I wanted to bring to our city council. I did work with Councillor Pate and the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network to work on that motion. And even though some of our councillors did not approve the concept, some of the discussions were that it would cost too much money, that right now is not the time to do it, they would like to give a hand up instead of a hand out. So at least there's some awareness in our community, and we did get the support, and our mayor broke the tie. So I'm very happy that it did go through, but it's definitely needed. And Niagara Falls is a community that I think could benefit from it.
Thank you for that. Paints us a picture of your community as well. I love the way councillors do that. Always talk
Thank you.
about where you live with love, eh?
Thank
Councillor
you.
Jen.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Nice to meet you, Senator, and everyone else. My daughter just called me. She hasn't called me since I've been sitting here, but as soon as you called my name, she's like, "Mom."
Of course.
Yeah. So I'm from the city of Waterloo. She brought me yogurt. I'm from the city of Waterloo, which is I am a councillor on the lower tier of a two-tier system. And so our motion was an advocacy motion. We don't have the ability to implement anything, but we did advocate Yeah, can you ask Audrey to help you with that, please? Sorry.
No apology.
And so we are located city of Waterloo and region of Waterloo on the traditional lands of Anishinaabe, Chinantan, and Haudenosaunee people. And so it's so important, I think, so I'm glad you introduced with a land acknowledgement as well. Just thinking about poverty in general, I think we can't ignore the exacerbated poverty in Indigenous communities as well. And so the reason that what it looks like here is, and one of the reasons that I ran for council in 2018 in the first place, is to bring attention to the geographical distribution of poverty. So the city of Waterloo has 3 post-secondary institutions in it: University of Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier University, and also the Conestoga College, a campus. And so there's this impression that Waterloo is very affluent, and it is. But that the poverty lives elsewhere. And so it was really important to me to bring attention to the fact that we have poverty, and it's distributed as it is in many communities, and often sectioned off by expressways, as happened in the 1980s, kind of by design. And that's exactly what happens in the city of Waterloo. And you can just see a microcosm of that in the ward I represent, where there's pockets of major affluence, like $3 to $5 million homes, and then pockets of poverty. So it was really important for me to draw attention to that. And of course, sorry, I turned, oh my gosh, this morning. The pandemic made that much more clear. And so just to highlight, sorry, very quickly, the statistics here, if you're familiar with the Municipal Quality of Life Dashboard from the federal government, 11.9% of people in Waterloo live in poverty, and that's higher than the provincial average, which is 8.3%, and the majority of those are 35.3%. And so that's just the context of what poverty looks like here. And I think what that's affected is there's a lot of fatigue in advocacy and activism sectors, because things are getting worse and their resources are getting less. And so I think we need to both draw attention to poverty, but also find ways to really enable and support the activism that's happening, because that's a big problem I'm seeing in my community.
Thank you, Councillor Jen. Councillor Theresa. Councillor Theresa.
There we go. Hi, Bernadette.
Hi, Theresa.
Senator, sorry.
That's okay.
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm from Ottawa, nation's capital, and there's poverty here. It comes as a surprise to people. They think of Ottawa as all federal government jobs, and that ain't the case. There's very much a lot of poverty as well. And interesting, with Jen from Waterloo, yeah, you have pockets, you have areas. I'm the chair of Ottawa Community Housing, which is Ottawa's social housing network of homes, and we have 15,000 homes across the city. But we also have waiting lists of 12,000. So the rent is high, and that's part of the problem. People can't afford their rent. They are having a tough time, and with food. The food bank is just barely managing. They really are getting drowned, and that's happening right in my own community. What used to be a small pantry for those who are immediately nearby has exploded into a full-blown food bank. And it ends up that they come to municipalities for help because we're right there, and they talk to us regularly. And a community house in a social housing neighborhood, well, of course, I'm connected with them, and sometimes they're just a few blocks from me, and they're struggling. I can see that basic income would help. I've talked to the director of the food bank, who is very supportive of it. And probably the biggest supporter of it is public health. The motion that I got passed at City Council would not have happened if it had not been passed already at Ottawa Public Health's board. And it passed there. And so we kind of embarrassed the councillors to pass it at City Council, because how could you go against our own Ottawa Public Health? Unfortunately, I didn't get the mayor on board, but it passed, and that was something. And we're very grateful for it. It's a message. It's another voice that adds to the other voices and starts to become a choir, and we need it. I see it all the time. I see the struggling in the communities that I represent through Ottawa Community Housing across the city. And I'm concerned about the future. We have positive notes. We're building housing. We're actually building affordable housing. We just had one of those photo ops with the shovels, and we're going to build 331 units immediately coming in, and eventually 1,000, and basically building an entire neighborhood of affordable housing. But the fact that there's been decades of strangulation on funding for nonprofit housing, we're playing catch up. And the consequence of that is that housing is incredibly expensive for anyone, because there's not enough nonprofit housing for those who really need it. So they go into market housing, and here's something that's happening right now. They get rent-evicted because the property owners of a building realize they can get a lot more rent because they're in a great location, but they've had these tenants for a long time, so they don't pay much rent because it just goes continuously up. The only time they get more money is if somebody leaves, and then they fix it up and then charge more. Well, they decided to tell every single person in the building that they had to leave. They had to leave because there's renovations going on. Now, most of those, we know that the renovations are cosmetic. They're not deep down, gutting the whole building. And it means that there's more people struggling. So we've got some work to do in terms of, just supporting these people. So basic income I see as a platform. It's something that is necessary to give people that, take away that panic of not having anything, particularly people in vulnerable professions where they're just, picking up here and there, trying to make a living. So a lot of concern about that. I was just reading something on Facebook that my son posted, and he's got a wicked sense of humor, but he posted about the game of Monopoly, where you go on the board and you get $200. And he said, who knew that Monopoly was promoting basic income? So nobody complained about that.
Thank you, Theresa.
Okay, thank you.
It's interesting that the three of you, so far, Lori, Jen, and you talk about your cities, from the perspective of there's tourism, there are universities, it's the capital, these are successful places, but poverty is so very, very present, and we still have to find ways to have those conversations out loud around those tables. Interesting, Theresa, your strategy to use public health as well to bring weight to that discussion. Very interesting. I'll go next to Councillor Ted, who has lots of experience in the provincial world and in the municipal world as well. Hello, Councillor Ted. Hello, Councillor Ted. And you're muted.
How's that? Is that
Perfect.
okay? Okay.
Yes.
I was privileged to be part of the announcement with Premier Wynne in Hamilton in April 2017 of the pilot project, which, as you know, was despite the promise of the about to be incoming Premier Ford, that it wouldn't be touched until it was complete and evaluated properly. It was canceled. And basic income has a long history. It actually started with Robert Stanfield many, many years ago. If he hadn't have dropped that football, who knows what might have happened. My city is really a tale of two cities. I think when we talk about basic income, I would preface that by saying there's something deeply unhealthy and dangerous going on in many of our communities. Our motto in the city is to be the best place to raise a child, and also to be the best place for people who are seniors like me to age in place. I'm fortunate we're well enough off to do that, but not a lot are. In Hamilton, which on a per capita basis is a relatively poor community, fiscally rich in volunteerism, but poor in actual dollars. Of those who are below the poverty line, 41% are children under the age of 14. Very serious if you're talking about potential and people meeting their whatever their God-given purpose might be. And 21% of our seniors live less than 20 years, according to our Code Red study, which is worse now than it was 10 years ago. Live less than 20 years than the average. So we have a long way to go, frankly. That's why I call it the tale of two cities. Fortunately, we've got a pretty progressive council. One of our major leaders is Tammy Hwang. She is just terrific. I gotta tell you, her work in AMO, her advocacy is just phenomenal. And together, several of us who spoke to the motion that eventually passed unanimously in City Council. We had to remind them that Tories and Dippers and Liberals were all involved historically over the years. And maybe it was time that we should quit betraying our constituents and get off our butts and actually make it happen. Can you imagine what could happen I imagine all the time what could happen in Hamilton if we had this program in place? People could find more decent housing. Some went back to school when the pilot was there. You had an upgrade on your food supply. You might even be able to buy fresh fruit and vegetables, diapers for the kids. People getting this money, investing it in RRSPs, I can tell you. And we've got a lot of people out there. Like Wayne Easter came up with a plan, the chair of the budget office. He's unfortunately no longer there, but it was a wonderful plan. And maybe we get a chance a little later to talk about the practicality of basic income and how we go about implementing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next up, well, Councillor Ted gave a great introduction to Councillor Tammy. What a ringing endorsement, but also mentioning AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, which I will heartily agree is an organization that is leaning into a lot of these issues And so I'm glad to see that you're on the board. Talk to us about your community, Tammy, Councillor Tammy.
Thank you, Senator. And I have the privilege of serving on the Association of Municipalities Ontario, which for our OBIN folks, it is a collection of municipalities. The membership is over 444 municipalities that are members. So think of it as the collective table for all municipalities to come together, learn from each other. I know from a Hamilton perspective, I learn a lot from rural and northern perspectives about what's happening in those communities, and it helps with driving decision making so much more inclusive and a lot more fulsome when it comes to having better conversations with other municipalities. So at AMO, we bring this up individually as board members, but at the same time, AMO listens to the resolutions of each of its municipalities. So when we speak about this is data-driven. AMO does receive all resolutions. So resolutions for, again, open people, Will kind of touched on that is what are some of those like sort of motions or documents that might come from a municipality to direct AMO or to the Premier or to the Prime Minister, that this is the action that they want to look at. So when AMO receives that, they tabulate all of the different resolutions from all of the different municipalities, and that helps drive policy making or policy and research at the AMO level. AMO has identified basic income as a driver and a lever. However, they are still exploring and scoping, and so they actually don't have a position on basic income yet. However, they are doing a lot of advocacy on targeted social assistance measures. And in the last year, we've actually put out policies around raising the benefit rates, ensuring that homeless people receive their shelter allowances, raising employment income exemptions, so ensuring that those that are generating income are able to keep a lot of it, and ensuring that the province doesn't claw back on any of the Canadian disability benefits as income. So those are just a small snapshot of what we're seeing coming out of AMO policy. In addition, Minister Michael Parsa, who is the Minister of Community Services and Childcare, has also sent a note to all of the heads of council, including AMO, to talk about progress updates, assuming full responsibility for the financial assistance of Ontario Works through a centralized intake system, an additional $52 million in administrative funding for all municipalities that are doing Ontario Works. And that is the commitment to work with municipalities on the new funding approach for 2026 and beyond. And they're also looking at providing one-time funding requests for all of this transformation and other types of costs that might be associated with this transformation. Now, I know that doesn't directly speak to basic income, but I think that this is a signal from the provincial government that they are at least listening. There's challenges though too, because as Carrie has mentioned earlier, there may or may not be a provincial election. So it might be a little bit tough to identify how far these measures are going to go, but I think that there's a real opportunity for open and for our advocacy to try and move the needle and move this forward. But thank you, Senator. I'm especially pleased to see you again. You did a great presentation at AMO this year. But I echo my fellow Councillor Ted McMeekin. Hamilton is a tale of two cities. It is very visible, homelessness and poverty. And so it is all of the things that we want to try and do are all of trying to find the levers that we can pull within our municipal sort of realm of responsibility in order to try and advocate and influence what this might look like. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Councillor Tammy. I have met some of you, but I know of all of you. You're doing great work in your communities, and it's very inspiring. So I'm just always honored to be on screen or in your presence. Let's dig a little deeper into why you feel it's important to advocate for basic income And I think you've already started to identify some of the pitfalls. And, you know, if you're looking at the chat, there's some good conversation there too. So if you want to lean into why basic income is a solution to the impact of poverty and inequality in your community, let's lean into that a bit. And we'll start again with Councillor Lori. You talked about the motion being, or the conversation was good around the table, but people were supportive of the concept, but had concerns. So why do you feel that you want to pursue guaranteed basic income, and how do you want to do that next after this conversation you've just had?
Thank you so much, Senator. I think for me, the research that I've done, I looked at Hamilton when they brought the motion forward with Councillor McMeekin. I looked at that. I looked at all different models. I looked at replacing some of the older programs, like when OW, ODSP, CPP, and Old Age Security were all implemented. They were implemented a long time ago with different reasons. I don't think anybody expected them to be in place this long, and a lot of them have not been increased for a very long time. And if they are increased, they're very small increases. So I think what we have is systems that were put in place for a specific reason. They're not necessarily working right now. We have 4 administration models. One of the concepts is combining some of those together. And I do realize 2 are at a federal level and 2 are at a provincial level, but combining that people have a guaranteed basic income. And looking through the pilot and looking through all of the studies, you can see what it does to people. It improves their mental health. It improves the money that they have available for proper groceries. It improves their physical health. It improves their children. There's improvements all the way around. And I think with what we're doing now, it's not working. And some of the things we just don't have control of. So what can we do to fix that? And I know for me, being at the lower tier of a 2-tier municipality, we're told it's not our responsibility for housing, mental health, addiction. It's the upper tier, it's the Niagara region. So a lot of times I'm thinking, these are our residents and we need to help them. How are we going to help them if we keep being told it's not our responsibility? Now, that's not saying that Niagara Falls is not doing anything for those things. We are. But when you're told that it's another level of government that it's responsible, it's a little bit hard. So moving forward, what I would like to see, a lot of times, again, because it was a little bit controversial when I brought it up and it just passed with the concept, not the approval, I need to be able to bring it up on something that's already in place. I can't bring it up cold. So whenever resolutions come to the city of Niagara Falls and they're on our agenda, I'll start the conversation again. I'll do some more research and point to those pilot programs. With the elections coming up, I think there's going to be a little bit more discussions, and that might be a great opportunity to do that as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a very practical way to continue the conversation, right? To come at it again from a different perspective, to use, like, it's very interesting what AMO is doing too, right? Terry in the chat is saying, wow, that's great. There's data that you can sort of grab on to sort of refuel the conversation around the table. In the chat, you'll see the social assistance rates that are being posted. Yeah, when I came into the legal clinic system in 1991, it was 663, I think, for social assistance, and there's been a $70 increase in those 29 years. It's remarkable,
Yes.
the situation that we're in. So thank you for keeping the conversation going, Councillor Lori. Yeah, Councillor Jen, how do you see basic income? How do you see the next steps for you and your community and your council continuing the conversation? What do you need to see?
At the council level?
Yeah. What do you need to continue the conversation around basic income?
Well, I mean, part of it is continuing to make the case for it. And I'm not really quite sure, I guess, to keep it on the agenda and to find a way to communicate to people so they buy in. And like, there are so many reasons why it's good and important and it's easy to, like, to me, I constantly think like, what will it take to get people to see that this is just a good idea? You know, like my background is in social work. And so I see things at like, or I use the lens of the micro, the macro, or the meso community level, and the macro, sort of that bigger institutional policy and organizational framework. And so I try and not convince people, but draw them in that way, and to say, you know, it's about basic needs and the dignity and pride that we get in being able to meet our basic needs without having to beg for them. You know, there is some dignity in that, going into an office every month to prove that you are worthy of $700 is bonkers. And so, but beyond basic needs, it's like what Councillor Ted said, it's this right that we should all have to self-actualization as well, beyond meeting those basic needs. And then on a community level, like we have when people are able to meet their basic needs and they feel like they can self-actualize, they can contribute to their communities because they have the capacity and resources to do so. And we just had a presentation from the Volunteer Action Center explaining to us that informal caregiving is declining rapidly, and we saw that during the pandemic, and the numbers haven't come up. And at the same time, people are doing a lot more of informal volunteering and caregiving, and that puts a really big strain on everyone. And then for people who don't just see the inherent benefits of that, I think, okay, well, how else can we keep this on the municipal conversation? Because I think our job, to answer your question, is to keep it on the radar and to keep talking about it. And beyond passing the motion, especially for me as a lower tier councillor, who we don't have any jurisdiction over ODSP or OW, is how do I keep it on the conversation for people in my world at the municipal level to say, here's what we can be doing within our lane. Here's the advocacy we need to be doing to different levels. And I think a couple of ways that maybe most convincing for people at a lower tier municipal level would be to say, well, if we had basic income, we may have to spend less on fee assistance programs, for example, or other programs that we're basically subsidizing because people aren't able to afford sending their kids to like play badminton, like do a swimming class. You know, like we should all be able to do this. I take that for granted. We're not super wealthy, but I take for granted that every season I can put my kids into swimming lessons. And so making the case that, oh, maybe it can help our like municipal financial situation because we don't have great funding anyways. And then of course the big one is economic development, right? Like that's the thing that convinces most people. And so you say, well, yes. Like if people had money, they'd be able to like a basic income and have a little bit to spend. Maybe they'd go out with their friend on Friday night. They get their nails done. I like getting my nails done. And they'd get their nails done and they go out with their friend on a Friday night, and maybe they'd go to the local theater, and maybe then they'd buy a coffee for $5, you know, like just. And everyone just deserves to be able to do that. We shouldn't have to prove that we have a dignified amount of money to make ourselves feel good and be around people we like and be out in the community. We should just do that. So anyways, those are the ways I feel like keeping it on the radar we can possibly do with that sort of like intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting. I find right now it's very challenging to talk about the collective. I think after the pandemic and during the pandemic and maybe even before the pandemic, we were going through these spaces where we were becoming very close to our own situation, our own individual situation. But now these conversations around basic income are about the collective, about making sure everyone can contribute to their communities, and that has a value for everyone from an economic perspective too. You know, during the pandemic in Cornwall, I was mayor then, we had to find ways to justify community building, and we used economic development as a an argument. So that whole idea of sharing stories and finding different ways to make the case, Councillor Jen, are really interesting. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Theresa. How do we continue to make the case around basic income? How do you plan to continue making the case? What are the next steps?
Well, you know, I'll take a page of learning from our own mayor, who's running around saying that of the fairness campaign for where Ottawa's getting shortchanged on money, and how badly we need it. I would make the same case for our residents. how badly they need some kind of level of income. And it's the same thing. You know what? I wasn't a basic income supporter, or well, I just didn't have it on my radar and thinking, that was a solution. But a number of things have convinced me. I want to give a shout out to Joe Foster, by the way, who's here, who brought me into his living room and talked to me about it, and another few people as well. I have a wonderful person on my staff, Sue Garvey, who used to be executive director of Cornerstone, and I had to be convinced because I have to sell it to others, and I see the benefits in terms of just keeping people on a level where they're not panicking. It's also about dignity as well. I think that was mentioned. Way back when I didn't have an income, but I was a mom at home with 2 kids, my biggest thrill was going to the mailbox and getting my baby bonus check. That check was $30 a kid for a month, so that was $60. And I was like, woohoo, this is mine. It came in my name, which was the plan. It was created as a way to get funds to somebody who did not have an income. And it started years ago, and they made a point to make sure that it went to the woman in the house, the mother, and it was successful. Now it's been faded out, and and it goes to those who it's clawed back if you make so much. But I don't have a problem with that. But it was just the fact that it brought dignity to you, and I remember that feeling, and I think that could be replicated to anyone who is trying to do other things, because oftentimes the person who's in most need is doing things but not getting paid for it. And it's usually to do with caregiving. They may be caregiving for parents, they may be caregiving for children. There's a number of things that they're doing. So that's another reason. By the way, I'm a big fan of Hamilton. I'm from Hamilton originally, and
I love shout outs. Go ahead,
yeah,
Theresa.
Yeah.
You're here.
Born and raised, steelworker's daughter, but it's just great that they were ahead of the game, and that's the kind of thing I was watching, is the fact that there was examples showing that it could work. The conference that was held back in May was very useful too, to hear more examples, more research. This is not just a flippant idea that just came out of nowhere. This is something that has been very researched. In the United States, there's examples as well. They're more local, to a certain region, but I've been hearing some studies out there, and it takes the burden off. It means that you can just get on, because life is more complicated than just doing a job. Sometimes you have a lot of responsibilities, and those are the kind of people that truly need help. But even just the fact that, it could help pay for education. Like when I think of people trying to graduate from university, trying to graduate from high school, pardon me, to go to university, and what stops them? They don't have the money for the tuition. Wouldn't it be great if they had a base so that they could not have 4 part-time jobs just so they can be like everyone else and go to university? So there's so many examples of where we could see a benefit. And yes, as Jen was saying, people will actually help the economy if they have some money in their pocket. It makes a difference. So that's why I'm continuing. It's something that we're going to see more of. I think that it's catching on, the idea. I really do. I don't assume that it'll catch on fast, but those 2 bills have been great in the Senate and in the House of Commons. You've got to keep repeating the message. Even if it's not going to go away. The need is not going to go away.
It's not. And what we've done so far hasn't worked. I mean, that's kind of a fact you can't get around at this point. Thanks for highlighting, the baby bonus or the child tax credit. These are not new concepts, right? Basic income, guaranteed basic income is not this new concept. This is something that Canadian society knows and understands. And again, it's about how you're making the case. The chat is super brilliant as well, by the way. The issue around dignity keeps coming up for sure. The clients that I've accompanied through social assistance battles needed teeth to be able to go to a job interview. I mean, these are things that have to be said so that people understand that, if they're going to wait in line and then get treated with disdain at a social assistance office, this is not helpful to people contributing to their fullest ability. And you have to do all the things. Again, in the chat, you're talking about higher wages, living wages. You're talking about access to healthcare, pharmacare. So all of the things still have to be discussed. Even as we're talking about basic income, you still have to do all of the other things. Let's go to Councillor Ted and lean into basic income and how you see the conversation going, or how would you pursue this conversation around basic income?
I see it as an equity human rights issue and also an economic driver. Martin Luther King in the mid-60s used to say that politics is about decisions around the distribution of goods, services, and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And good politics is anything that narrows the gap between the richest and those who are left the flyover zone, the leftover. I also grew up in the YMCA movement. I've been very active with the Y. And one of the things I've learned there is that it's far easier to build and grow strong, healthy kids than it is to fix broken adults. We really need to think an awful lot about what we're doing to our kids and the opportunities we're denying them by keeping many of them in a poor situation. Someone asked me a couple of weeks ago, Ted, honestly, straight up, how would you avoid child poverty? And I said, well, I just wouldn't allow any child to be born into poverty. That's what basic income is all about. And that if we believe that policy should be based on evidence, directed by principle and designed to achieve the greatest good, there is no more appropriate policy that would lift, higher waters lift all boats, that would help our people better than the economic driver. Just think of the stimulus. Wayne Easter pointed this out when he headed up the budget office. The Federal Liberal National Convention a couple of years back, of all the good ideas, the number one by vote of the delegates was move on basic income. In PEI, you've got a conservative premier and all-party agreement requesting the feds to pilot PEI as a pilot province. And some of us have been supporting Premier King in those efforts, but they're not moving fast enough. So it ultimately is political. Hazel McCallion once said to me, I asked her about her view of democracy. She said, well, it's simple. She said, the feds have got all the money, the province has got all the power, and municipalities have or will soon have all the problems. Anyhow, all of us. The other thing, by the way, the obvious one is to be as creative as we can within the context. Habitat for Humanity up in Waterloo, with partners, building and political partners, has launched a partnership campaign to build 7,000 homes and 3,000 rent geared to income units at 45% of the market rate. And we've been involved here in Hamilton, a few of us. In fact, I was at a meeting yesterday with our local habitat group and some builders about the possibility of replicating that. So if the market system isn't working, back in the 60s and early 70s, municipalities were directly engaged in providing housing. I think maybe if the market's not going to do that, then maybe we got to do that ourselves again. Anyhow, I hope that's helpful.
Councillor Ted, that's very helpful. First of all, quoting from Martin Luther King is always helpful. But also, I think you raised the issue around politics, right? And politics in a good way, right? In the way
Yeah.
that is nonpartisan, that is bringing people together from different aspects. I mean, we can't forget that Hugh Segal, who was a conservative, was a big champion of the conversation around basic income.
Yeah.
So
Good
this
friend.
doesn't have to be a partisan issue. It should really be an across the board kind of issue. And I think you've reminded us of that. And also local initiatives are always helpful and always inspiring when the going gets a bit rough around these conversations. Thank you.
Mario Cuomo used to say, politicians campaign in poetry but govern in prose. And good politics,
Yes.
good politics is anything that narrows the gap.
Correct. We're starting to have questions in the chat. So I'm going to go to Councillor Tammy, and then we may want to start to take some questions as well. Councillor Tammy, you've had the benefit of hearing a lot of these answers. What do you want to add to this issue about speaking directly to basic income and how you do that and how you go further?
Senator, could I just use the word ditto?
Yeah, go ahead and give more though, but yes.
So I agree wholeheartedly with all of the other councillors, especially with the sage words of my council colleague, Ted McMeekin. I think I'm going to come at this a little bit differently, and again, come at this from the AMO perspective. AMO wholeheartedly realizes that a lot of this cannot be solved by municipalities alone. And so we also know, and as indicated in the chat, there has been significant downloading from the province to municipalities. Municipalities are left holding the bag, and they also don't have any of the financial tools that provincial governments or federal governments have access to. Things like HSTE or PSTE, any of those sort of like variable kind of like levers that they can generate revenue from. So AMO is looking at this differently by appealing to the government by launching a campaign called the Social and Economic Prosperity Review. The idea is that municipalities need to sit down with the provincial government and really think about how we review revenues, how we look at costs, how we look at the financial risks, and the analysis of things like Ontario's infrastructure and our service delivery needs. It's coming at this in a bit of a roundabout sort of way, but the core concept here is that if we are here to advocate for basic income, we also have to look at it from a framework that works for municipalities, framework that works for provincial governments, and a framework that works for the feds. And at this point, in this day and age, it doesn't work because, as we heard, the disappointing news from last week, it didn't pass second reading in the House of Commons. So although we are just kind of placing a lot of our hopes and dreams right now on Senator Pate's sort of private member's bill, again, it's kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket where you're really not coming at this from a solutions-driven sort of perspective. So AMO really wants to think about this differently, wants to think about how are we allocating dollars and resources in a way that helps facilitate all of these different initiatives and all of these different things that municipalities are faced with. Because in addition to ensuring that we have people that are well resourced and ensure that they are able to take care of their own, municipalities also have to ensure that we still have clean drinking water, access to affordable housing, access to mental health and addiction services. There are a lot more sort of things in the greater sort of bucket where the only finite amount of money that we have, which is the taxpayer, that's not a tree that grows money, and that's not a pulling money out of the sky kind of deal. So we do need to think differently about how we allocate resources and how do we do all of that while also ensuring that our residents are in the best place possible to be contributing to our municipalities. I think that that's just a little bit of a
Yep.
like It's
Well,
it's a
that's
little
very
pie in the sky, Senator, but I think that we're trying really hard to figure out what are some different solutions we can bring differently because as has been mentioned by every single counselor, what we have today is not working. So we need to think differently.
exactly. But thank you, Councillor Tammy, for highlighting that, municipalities, while being close, while being the order of government that does everything, the financing is limited. And I'll point out that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is doing some work on that
Yes.
as well in terms of how we should be more properly financing municipalities because they own 60% of the infrastructure, by the way. And so we haven't even touched on climate crisis and the impact of that and what cities have to deal with. Will help me come up with a question. I think there are several questions and the chat's just flowing by. Will, can you point out the first question and maybe let's see if some of the councillors can
Sure
take a stab
thing.
at answering.
So we have two questions that we can get to in our time that remains. So the
Mhm.
first one that has been consistent throughout our dialogue today is how basic income may be an alternative approach to ODSP, Ontario Works, and other programming. Is this realistic in your mind? How do we get there? And then we'll get to the next question after that.
Sure. Do any of the councillors want to take that on? So as you know, in Ontario, we have a complicated system of supports for people not properly resourced. But the question is, would this replace that? How would that be? Is it realistic?
Ted here. I think it is. There are probably all kinds of savings by consolidating and instead of 962 bureaucracies, have one program that's designed to benefit everybody. That makes sense. So I think Wayne Easter's plan was 20,000. You could earn another 20. Then every $3 over that $40,000 threshold, $1 would be clawed back. That would help. I believe he estimated about 18% of Canadians, a lot of single parent moms buy diapers for their kids. So yes.
Thank you.
Senator?
Tammy. Oh, sorry. Councillor Tammy and then Councillor Theresa.
Oh, sorry about that.
Go ahead.
I think that we've brought this up with different ministries at AMO. So again, at the annual conference, municipalities have an opportunity to delegate in front of specific ministries. And I know the Hamilton delegation has brought this up significantly. The challenge, though, is that ministries are very set on looking at things from an efficiency standpoint. And sometimes they may not see that the idea of consolidation is going to be a lot more efficient than potentially taking different programs out of other ministries. So many times the ministries are all split up in terms of like which programs they deliver. So the idea of taking a program out of their existing ministry to consolidate it into something else is actually not usually on the table. So I think that we do have to have a greater conversation about what is the dollar value or the value for dollar for each of our taxpayers to support any of these programs. And I don't know what that looks like because that could be a greater campaign. And I don't know how to potentially influence each of these ministries because everybody kind of gets their back up on like, they don't want to lose any of the dollars that they might have in their particular ministry. So how do you speak about this from a global perspective, saying that actually, if we took yours and yours and yours and made it all better, then we'd actually find the efficiency savings. So I'm not sure because I think that it's on a minister to minister sort of basis. It might be from a leadership perspective. It might be from the premier. I'm not sure again. So I think that when I see this, I think that the challenge is that each ministry wants to hold on to whatever funding bucket that they have and they don't want to lose it. So that's where I'm going to bring that forward as potentially a piece of the argument here.
Right. I have Councillor Lori, and I thought Councillor Theresa wanted to speak, but let's go with Councillor Lori. Her hand is up.
Thank you, Senator. I think that this is a huge project, and what we need to do is break it down into smaller pieces. What are our short-term goals, midterm, and long-term goals? When we have governments that are in for a certain number of years, these plans would go into another election, another government possibly. And I think that the government really needs to work with organizations that can prove the concepts, get the data together, just as Councillor McMeekin was saying about Mr. Easter, Mr. Siegel. They have some concepts and some models to move forward. So I think we really need to look at those models, promote those models, and work in smaller chunks, because this is a huge undertaking from where we are now and where we need to get to, and we can't do it all overnight.
Thank you for that. Will, last question, because we have a few minutes left. This has been a really good conversation.
I thought I was next.
Oh, okay. We have a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Theresa.
Start at the top. That's why there was two bills one at the Senate and the Parliament. Start at the federal level. Think of GIS. Think in terms of what we've already done. We've already done for those who are seniors and are low income. We can build on that. That's what I think is, when I think of, we wouldn't even think of taking that away from them. We don't make them go through a big exercise. That's a good start. And that's what those private member bills were, to study and look at it. I want the provinces involved, but the problem is silos, as has been pointed out. And we've got to get away from that. We've got to look at the common good, but it has to start at the top, because this is something we need for all of Canada. And the provinces, well, of course, it's tough to work with them, but just think of CERB and how fast that happened. So I think there's possibilities, and that's the direction. We have to look at those positive stories and how it can be done and how it can be implemented. Provinces will probably end up doing some management, but let's go there.
Thanks for that, Theresa. Will, let me turn to you, because you're managing the time. What do we have time for?
Yes, so our last question, just quickly, and perhaps we can get a quick answer from all of our councillors and then end with you, Senator Clement, is just advice on, given the current media climate, people talking about defunding the CBC and CTVs being attacked and all kinds of independent media and other sources. What advice would you have to the advocates here and who may watch this afterwards as to bringing this conversation further, whether it's through op-eds, whether it's through interviews, in this media landscape? What advice may you impart on them? And then we'll close our session for the day.
Yeah, no, I want to turn it back to our council. Is there anybody who wants to speak to that particular issue? I think the answer is always doing all of those things that you listed, but do any of the councillors want to? Councillor Tammy.
I think that what we're seeing, so as a new councillor, I'm only brand new since 2022. I find that the loud voices, so ensuring that we are consistently in front of our elected officials, we are having these conversations publicly, that could be through all of these like op-eds and the blog posts, but also I think writing very detailed and like customized letters. So I know how much everybody loves those form letters, but they just clog up inboxes and nobody ever really reads them. So I think having like a very tailored, customized email or letter to your elected officials at all levels, as an individual speaking about this, will go very far. Because I'll say that when I receive the chain letters, it's really hard to kind of get through 120, 600 letters where they all say the exact same thing. However, when I do get the one that is very like deliberate and very like practical or very like thoughtful in what, I take that very, very seriously. So I would love to see almost like a back to letter writing campaign, having conversations with your elected officials. That I feel is very impactful. So thank you, Senator.
Kicking it old school, going to the to the source of the stories. Councillor Jen was talking to us about sharing stories, and I think that's the local pieces are what resonate. And you're right, we do get so much email as politicians, and the ones that we pay most attention to are the ones that are signed with a real name.
Absolutely.
And a real person.
Yeah.
This conversation has been wonderful, and I think just part of a larger conversation that's going to continue. Senator Pate's bill is at the Finance Committee. Conversations continue next week. As you will understand, the financing is the piece that captures people's attention positively and negatively. And so we wish her well. I am there to support her in that work. We are there to support her in that work. But also, please don't hesitate to reach out to your senators. There are elected officials, but senators are appointed. And that's controversial, but it also means that we are there for a longer term. We're there if we want till the age 75. And so we can put in some long-term work, and we're accountable to our communities for that long-term work. So don't forget to keep us and use our platforms and our places to try and continue this conversation as well. Will? It's for me to thank everybody. Municipal, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'm sorry, Senator. Well, thank you everybody for your time. We're going to end our recorded portion of this discussion here, just being conscious of the senator's time, but also of everyone's time, understanding we're now past 12 o'clock. So thank you, Senator, firstly, for moderating and leading our discussion today, and for all of your advocacy and the dedication you bring to basic income advocacy at a federal level, whether it be supporting Senator Pate, supporting folks like us from the Ontario Basic Income Network, and everyone gathered here with your wisdom and your insights, but also your own advocacy in your own community and region as well. So we really appreciate that.
OBIN. Go OBIN.
Thank you very much. And thank you to our councillors on behalf of our entire team at OBIN. Thank you for taking your time this morning to speak with all of us. Thank you for giving your insights, but also thank you for taking a position of leadership on this issue in your communities. Carrie earlier made a really important point on hope. And as a young person involved in basic income advocacy, I've seen a lot of older folks who've been involved in this movement for a very, very, very long time who had no hope. And municipal resolutions and the federal bills we've seen recently have reinstilled hope in people, has reinstilled that understanding and belief that I can walk down to my councillor down the street, have a cup of coffee, and make an argument for basic income to them and see a motion passed a few months later and see some good come from that and progress come from that. So thank you for reinstilling a bit of hope in us. We'll end that conversation here today. And again, on behalf of OBIN, thank you very much.
You're welcome.